My name is Darcy. I currently live in a single-family home with my husband Carlos and our daughter Nikki. Carlos and I met back in college and we instantly clicked. I was in the design department and he was studying law. We happened to be in the same club. After graduating, I took a job at a design firm and was doing what I loved. Carlos and I dated for a few years and got married in our early 20s. I continued to work during my early pregnancy, but once Nikki was born, I decided to focus on raising her. Carlos and others encouraged me to prioritize parenting, so now I work from home. By the way, Carlos passed the bar exam after college and is now working as a lawyer. Mommy, I'm going to play with my friends. Be back before it gets dark. Okay. Life's pretty amazing, living with a loving husband and an adorable daughter while doing the design work I love. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. I was out shopping a bit far from home when I saw my mother-in-law, Christine, struggling with some heavy bags. I couldn't help but approach her. Mother-in-law! Oh, Darcy, what a coincidence! Christine smiled warmly at me. Since it had been a while, I felt happy to see her and suggested, "How about some tea?" "I'd love to, but I'm in a hurry." "Oh, I see. My apologies." "It's fine. Let's catch up over tea next time." "Then let me at least help you get these bags home. They look really heavy." After some convincing, I loaded her bags into the back seat of my car. They were pretty heavy, and carrying two of them seemed like a task. Christine said, "I'm sorry and thank you," with a smile, so I felt reassured that being a bit assertive was okay. Plus, there was something I had been wanting to talk to her about. We chatted about this and that as I drove her home. It takes about 3 hours and 30 minutes to drive to our in-laws' place, so we can't visit frequently. However, we do make it a point to visit for New Year celebrations, so I know the way. "Weren't you struggling carrying all this by yourself?" I decided to ask about something that had been bothering me on the way. In one of the bags my mother-in-law was carrying, there were groceries. In the other, there were daily necessities and cosmetics, items clearly geared toward a younger demographic rather than what she typically used. "Well, they're essentials. I ended up buying a lot." Her expression seemed a bit down. I didn't pry any further and drove us to her home. "Darcy, thank you so much. You've been a huge help. This is far enough." "I can take the bags to the entrance." "Oh, you don't have to." When my mother-in-law opened the door, I placed the bags at the entrance. Just then, I heard a harsh voice. "Finally, you're back! What took so long, mother-in-law?" The voice belonged to my sister-in-law, Katie. She seemed surprised to see me, and her words trailed off. I was equally surprised to see Katie and found myself frozen in place. My mother-in-law looked flustered as she assessed the situation. "Sister-in-law, long time no see. How have you been?" "Fine, fine. It's been a while for you too, Katie." Saying that, I returned a smile to Katie. I hold back a sigh as I look at her. She clearly looks like she's just woken up. She is holding her mobile phone in one hand. Her incomplete sentence alone was enough to raise suspicions. "I'm sorry for the sudden visit. I happened to see mother-in-law while I was shopping nearby. She looked like she was struggling with the bags, so I came along." "I see. I just got back from work this morning. I'm a mess. Sorry. Thank you for helping mother-in-law. I'll take it from here." Katie quickly grabbed the bags and took them inside. In a soft voice, I asked mother-in-law, "Is everything all right living with Katie and the family?" Mother-in-law simply smiled and nodded. "Thanks for your concern, Darcy. I'm fine. Sorry I can't even offer you tea." "No worries. It was nice to catch up. I'll visit again." Without pressing mother-in-law further, I left. Still, I couldn't simply ignore the situation I just witnessed. Originally, mother-in-law was supposed to live with us, but after father-in-law passed away over a decade ago, my brother-in-law Brett said, "We'll live in the family home and take care of Mom." Even Carlos, my husband, was initially concerned. I felt uneasy about the situation, so I initiated a discussion, but it didn't go well. Carlos is busy with work, right? And he has irregular days off. I work close by, and Katie's parents live nearby too. But still, don't worry. I was a troublemaker back in the day, and I haven't done much for Mom, you know? I want to repay her. All right. Given what was said, Carlos couldn't really argue. In the end, with my mother-in-law's consent, my brother-in-law and his wife moved into her house. Today, I shared what happened with Carlos. Really? That's concerning. I'm not sure, but it makes me a little worried. Let's give Brett a call. After hearing my concerns, Carlos decided to call Brett. Hello? Carlos, what's up? Hey, it's been a while. Just checking in on you. I'm doing fine. After exchanging pleasantries, Carlos began to move the conversation forward. Calls usually led to discussions about how great things were between him and Katie, and this was no exception. Good to hear you're doing well. Yep, we're taking an extended vacation next week. What about Mom? Is she coming? Mom said we should just go, the two of us. Carlos and I exchanged looks. Given my mother-in-law's personality, this was no surprise. But we did notice Brett hesitating for a moment. In that case, let's have Mom stay with us during that time. What? At Carlos's words, Brett raised a surprised voice, and I looked up. Carlos, who smiled at me, nodded slightly and continued. We haven't seen Mom in a while, and I think Nikki will be thrilled. I'll get in touch with Mom. So it's settled. Hey, wait! Carlos cut off the call before Brett could finish. Carlos exhaled deeply and looked at me with a serious face. We had stumbled upon an opportunity to discuss my mother-in-law. Following that, Carlos promptly arranged the dates with Brett. I coordinated with my mother-in-law, and she agreed to stay with us for about a week. Granny's coming today? Yes, isn't it exciting? Yeah, Nikki loves Granny. Nikki was ecstatic that her grandmother would be staying over. A few days later, my mother-in-law arrived at our home with minimal luggage. As soon as she entered, she looked relieved and bowed her head. I'm sorry for intruding for a whole week. Don't worry about it. You're more than welcome. Nikki has been looking forward to this, so please make yourself at home. And so we spent a week together with my mother-in-law. However, I felt uneasy about my mother-in-law's actions from day one. Before her arrival, I cleaned up the home office I usually use for work to make space for her. When I showed her the room, she immediately said, Oh, you've prepared such a room for me. I feel bad. I'd be okay just with the corner. No worries. Please feel free to use the room. I only use it for work anyway. I convinced her to use it, but she still seemed apologetic. Also, with the kids off school today, I was planning to make lunch for the three of us when she said, Let me cook. Can I use the fridge? She kept insisting on doing household chores even though I wanted her to relax. Gratefully, I managed to get her to unwind in the living room by having Nikki play with Granny. Additionally, she would say things like, Oh, don't go to the trouble of snacks for me. I'm not worth it. Or, I'm fine with whatever's left over. Cold food is enough for me. As if she's an outsider rather than family. She used to be much more vibrant. It was painful to see her belittling herself like this. When Carlos came home while Nikki and mother-in-law were chatting, I filled him in on how she was acting. I see. Thanks for letting me know. I wish she would value herself more. Let's keep an eye on her. It's only the first day. Right. And just when it was getting late and we were about to go to sleep, my mother-in-law said, I guess I'll borrow this spot for a bit. Carlos and I were at a loss for words at her action. She was trying to lie down and sleep on the basement floor. Mom? Carlos was speechless. I said as calmly as possible, Mother-in-law, please consider this your room until you leave. Use a comforter so you don't catch a cold. But won't that be a bother? Absolutely not. We want you to be comfortable and enjoy your stay here. I looked her straight in the eye, trying to convey my sincerity. From her behavior, it was obvious what kind of life she's had with her own family. When I smiled warmly, Mother-in-law's eyes filled with tears, and she finally broke down. It's been 10 years since I've slept in such a warm place. Thank you. What? My mind reeled from what I just heard. Carlos's voice was several octaves lower, filled with disbelief. Hey, Mom, tell us the truth. Are you getting along with Brett and the others? How's life been? Mother-in-law chuckled awkwardly before speaking. Well, getting along might be stretching it, but I have to make do, right? I mean, if they ditched me, I wouldn't know how to fend for myself at this age. Slowly, Mother-in-law began to share the grim reality of her life with us. Turns out, it was much worse than we could have ever imagined. She was handling all the housework in that home. Whenever Katie was a little unhappy, she would raise her voice at her. All the shopping responsibilities were left to Mother-in-law. She would buy whatever they needed. Moreover, Mother-in-law was shouldering most of the living expenses. Clearly, her son-in-law and his wife had ulterior motives when suggesting they move in together, mainly to exploit Mother-in-law's finances. Mother-in-law would only eat after the two of them were done, usually in the basement. The basement didn't even have heating, so she was freezing during the winter months. It's been a long time since I've had a meal like today's. I was always alone, you know. What? Are you serious? The reason Mother-in-law wanted to sleep in the basement was that it had become the norm for her at her previous home. Both Carlos and I were at a loss for words. Initially, when Brett and Katie moved in, they were kind to her. At first, Mother-in-law was happy and thought it was a good idea to live with them. However, as the years went by, their behavior changed drastically. Initially, Katie used to cook, and Brett would help with other chores. I'm so tired. Brett, you work so hard. Let me take care of things today. You should rest. Really? Thanks, Mom. That was probably the beginning. Mother-in-law, I'm really tired today. Oh, sorry, Katie. I have plans with the neighbors today. What? You're prioritizing them over me? Oh, I apologize. That's selfish of me. No, that's not it. Don't worry. I'll prepare dinner when I get back. This is my room, and this is Brett's room. Slowly but surely, they began to change how they treated Mother-in-law, manipulating her more and more. Eventually, she found herself taking on almost all of the housework and contributing financially as well. Initially, she was using what used to be father-in-law's study as her room. It was a well-equipped space with a bed and other furnishings. She was delighted to be able to use such a cherished space as her own room. Even the study wasn't safe from Katie's reach. One day, Katie suggested, "Let's renovate this old study." Hold on, Katie. This is my husband's cherished study. Can we please leave it as is? I'm just thinking of your well-being, Mother-in-law. Why do you have to make me look like the bad guy? I'm sorry, but I like it the way it is. Really? This room is outdated. It looks worthless. With that, Katie reached for a piece of glasswork. That was a music box made of glass, a favorite of my late father-in-law. He bought it during a trip they took together. It was something he treasured, but Katie deliberately dropped it. Oops, my bad. That wasn't on purpose. Oh. Wow, the glass is shattered everywhere. It's so dangerous. What a waste to keep this room the same, especially with all this junk. Please, don't touch anything else. Who do you think you're talking to? Fine, I'll leave the study alone, but from now on, you take care of everything in the house. And with all this junk, it's too dangerous for you to sleep here. You should sleep in the basement. What? Any complaints? In the end, Mother-in-law agreed and had to sleep in the basement. I felt like passing out, hearing all these shocking stories. At the same time, I was angry with myself for not noticing sooner. I'm sorry, Mom. How could I have not realized? Don't blame yourself. I was hiding it too. Isn't it pathetic? The reason we never noticed was also because of a scheme by brother-in-law and his wife. Mother-in-law was only given a room when relatives gathered at her house. But the room was empty, no bed, no furniture, and if she dared to speak up, they threatened to demolish her study. They were only nice to her when people were around. We didn't notice because of that. If mother-in-law and I hadn't crossed paths that day, this might have continued even longer. The thought sends shivers down my spine. I always wanted to discuss this with you, but that study and that house are full of memories with my husband. Tears flowed freely from mother-in-law, and I couldn't stop my own. Our precious mother-in-law had endured this for over a decade. I can't even imagine how tough it's been for her. Why would her own family do this? They're not human! I shouted and hugged mother-in-law tightly. Darcy, I'm sorry. I need to step out for a bit. After we cried together, Carlos gently rubbed my back and spoke softly. Don't worry, Darcy and Mom. I'll handle this. Please take care of Mom, Darcy. I nodded quietly. Got it. Leave mother-in-law to me. Carlos. I hugged our concerned-looking mother-in-law again, stroking her back to comfort her. Then I turned to Carlos and said firmly, Go teach those awful people a lesson. Of course. Carlos chuckled and nodded, then left the house. Later, Carlos called to say he wouldn't be back until tomorrow evening. I shared the news with mother-in-law, and we all drank warm milk, trying to lighten the mood with some good stories. Nikki, who had heard the commotion, looked worried, joined us. I wanted to overwrite at least some of the bad memories. Usually, I'd remind Nikki not to stay up late, but since tomorrow was a day off, the three of us enjoyed chatting till we were content. All right, that's enough for today. Mother-in-law, would you like to go shopping with us tomorrow? Huh? We can buy whatever you want and eat delicious food. There's a cute dessert place that Nikki loves. Why don't we enjoy a relaxed day, just the three of us? At my words, mother-in-law's eyes filled with tears again. She nodded slowly, repeating, Thank you, over and over. That night, we spread an air mattress in the living room and slept closely together, with mother-in-law in the middle. The next morning, mother-in-law greeted us with the same smile she often showed when father-in-law was alive. Good morning. And just as promised, we all had a fun shopping day. In the evening, we got a message from Carlos saying he had returned home, so we headed back as well. Before entering the house, I had one more thing to say to mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, we are on your side. Whatever is hurting you, just let it out here. We will always be by your side. And me too. I'm on Granny's side as well. Mother-in-law nodded silently to our words. Welcome home. Sorry for leaving the house to you. We're back. Everything okay? Yeah, no issues here. Carlos greeted us with a warm smile. I had Nikki and mother-in-law wait in my home office. Walking into the living room, my eyes widened at the sight of brother-in-law and his wife sitting on the floor. Their hands, resting on their knees, were trembling slightly. Upon seeing me, they greeted me in a soft voice, their faces filled with apprehension. What happened? My inner voice showed plainly on my face, which I turned to Carlos. Still smiling, he said, I haven't done anything yet. His use of yet made even me tense up, expecting something dramatic to happen. So, to cut to the chase, starting today, Mom will be living with us, Carlos continued. I felt relieved at those words. Carlos continued to speak to me as I nodded. So, Brett, do you fully grasp what you've put Mom through? And you too, Katie. Do you understand what you've done to someone else's mother in their own home? I can't say it's entirely your fault. We didn't notice it either. But you have to take responsibility for your actions. After all, you're supposed to be mature adults. Carlos spoke vehemently. It was the first time I'd ever seen the unusually gentle and calm Carlos so angry. I honestly dislike bringing up work matters at home, but this time I'm speaking as Miss Christine's attorney, not as family. His voice was friendly but low and icy. My brother-in-law and his wife meekly responded, "Yes." And after several hours of discussion, numerous decisions were made. First, my brother-in-law and his wife would no longer be living with us. They would have to return all the money they had been extracting from mother-in-law, plus pay additional compensation. Having decided to respect mother-in-law's emotional attachment to her study and her own home, brother-in-law and his wife moved out. We banned them from ever setting foot in mother-in-law's home again. Upon hearing the decision, mother-in-law gave a troubled smile. "So we are family, right? Asking for damages is a bit much, don't you think?" "No, this is a gesture from our son Brett to Miss Christine, right?" Carlos's words left Brett nodding so fervently he looked like he might lose his head. Yes, I'm truly sorry for everything. Please accept this as our sentiment." Brett seemed so diminished that you'd wonder what on earth had happened. After the conversation, Carlos took a deep breath and turned to mother-in-law. "So please accept this, Mom. Let's put an end to this. Brett and his wife will never forget what they've done and make sure it doesn't happen again." Both of them nodded in silence. Seeing this, Carlos smiled gently and continued in a low voice. "Well, it will never happen again, right?" Yes, never again. Absolutely." So the conversation ended. Within a few months, we had received the damages that Carlos had arranged from the brother-in-law and his wife. Mother-in-law wanted to give it to us, saying it was because we had helped her, but we refused. She insisted, so we agreed to accept a little each month for groceries and let mother-in-law use the rest. "Carlos, what did you say to Brett and his wife?" I was curious about that day, so I asked him when we were alone. Carlos scratched his head, even though it wasn't itchy. "Don't lose faith in me, okay?" "Why would I? You helped mother-in-law and made them regret their actions." Actually, Carlos had contacted Brett immediately after hearing what had happened. "It's strange for me to say, but I rarely get angry. But when I do, people say I'm scary. I think I really scared them when I called. He told me where he was right away." Although a bit distant, he drove straight to the destination. Upon arriving, he immediately questioned the two. "I couldn't let it go, especially because he's my brother and I had trusted him with Mom." I didn't know the details, but considering how scared they both looked, Carlos must have been terrifying when angry. On their way out, they bowed deeply, saying, "We're really sorry." "Well, mother-in-law seems happy, and so does Nikki. I'm happy too. Thank you for standing up for us, Carlos. Darcy, I'll continue to do my best for our family. Even after everything, it's good to know we can still be a happy family. I'm grateful for my dependable husband and for mother-in-law who chose to rely on us. From now on, I intend to make up for the hardships by being a dutiful daughter-in-law and do my best in every way."